All right, I'm going to pick on somebody. Let's see. Yeah, I figured if I started threatening to pick on people, somebody else would reply. Okay. Let's go with one more reply before I start calling on folks. Somebody say everybody else. Nico, I know you're just going to chat to me, so you got an answer for me? All right. Let's see. Raven, you got an answer for me? Can you factor this?
I'm here. You see me?
Good. I'm glad. I don't know who that is because I
The
can't
dollar
see.
bill.
Oh, good. I'm glad you joined us. Thank you. So now you can pay attention and see if you can. Where are you? Are you on Brandon's computer? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. He on side of me.
Okay. All right. Well, I can't see either one of y'all, but it's okay. As long as
We
y'all
right
are.
here. You see us now?
No, but it's okay. I can hear you both. We're good. Your bandwidth just isn't good to get me a picture, so it's okay. All right. So we're close with, okay, that's fine. So let's talk about factoring this x squared minus x minus 30. I need my largest number when I add them together to be negative. And so I see a couple of people with factors of 6 and 5. And so I am going to use 6 and 5, but I need the 6 to be negative and the 5 to be positive. Because when I add them together, I need that sum to be a negative. And so that's going to be that negative 6. So be super careful when you factor these. You can always go to the side and multiply them out to make sure that your factors actually do indeed give you what you're looking to see. Okay. My x squared minus 25, we did that one a while ago. That is the difference of two squares. And so I have x plus 5 and x minus 5. And then in the denominator, I also have the difference of two squares. And it's going to be x plus 4 and x minus 4. Okay. So now here's where we can get a little bit what I call creative in terms of simplifying. Okay. Traditionally, we look at one fraction and we see x minus 6, x minus 6. We can cancel those out and life is great. Then we start to look and say, well, I can't cancel anything left in this fraction and I can't cancel anything in this fraction. However, because of the nature of fractions, if it's in the numerator of one and the denominator of another, you can cancel and you're multiplying. So this x minus 4 divides out with this x minus 4, and this x plus 5 divides out with this x plus 5. And so I am left with an x minus 5 is the only factor left in the numerator, and my x plus 4 is the only factor left in the denominator. And that is my final answer. All right. Questions? All right. So same thing again. I'm going to practice our factoring here. I know, don't like it, but it's not going anywhere. I'm so sorry. So we're going to come over here to the side and we'll factor these together. So follow along with me. Stop me if you've got a question because I can certainly pause, okay? But I don't want you to get frustrated with the factoring. I just need you to be able to do this. So we're going to start by multiplying the end by 2. And so this is going to give me u squared minus 13u plus 12. This is going to factor into u minus 1 and u minus 12. 12 product, negative 13 in the middle. Dividing everything by 2 gives me u minus 1 half and u minus 12 halves. I want you to see this dividing by 2. My second factor is going to become u minus 6, and my first factor is going to be 2u minus 1, okay? So in this first piece, this is going to factor to 2u minus 1 times u minus 6. That's just the first factor in the numerator, okay? So now we're going to do 2u squared plus 3u minus 2, okay? Again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to multiply by that 2, so I have a u squared plus 3u minus 4. This becomes pretty nice to factor. So I'll be quiet as you're factoring this. Look up at the screen when you get some factors. And let's see what's happening with this. Right. So hopefully you discovered that that factored into 2u minus 1 and 2u plus 2. Before I go any further, I'm going to stop and see if you've got questions on how I factored that. Either one of those, how we factored it. Okay, so we move to the numerator of the second fraction. So this problem's got a lot of factoring in it. So again, we're going to use that bottoms up method. So I'm going to multiply the back end by 12. And so then I have some pretty nice factors of 12, which gives me negative 8 in the middle. And they're going to be u minus 2 and u minus 6. Dividing each of these factors by 12 and simplifying. So we're going to have to do a little bit more work on this one. So we can simplify each of these. This is going to be u minus 1/6 and u minus 1/2. And then we take that denominator. We just can't end up with a fraction for any of these. And so we have u minus 6u minus 1. And we have 2u minus 1. Okay. And then finally, the last piece we need to factor is 6u squared plus 11u minus 2. And so I have u squared plus 11u minus 12. So you see how long these problems are? This means that if you're finishing your quiz in record-breaking time, that's probably not good. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. So these are long problems. I mean, they just are. Okay. So this is going to be plus 12 minus 1. Dividing both sides or both pieces by 6. I have 12 over 6 and 1 over 6. 12 over 6 factors in, it simplifies to 2, and the 6 in the denominator moves out in front. And so my factors for this denominator are u plus 2 and 6u minus 1. All right, so now we have this incredibly large problem. It's factored, and now we can simplify it. And we can get a final answer. Okay. So one of the things I want you to pay attention to is sometimes things don't simplify. Okay. So I go through here, and 2u minus 1 simplifies. That's lovely. And 6u minus 1 simplifies. That's lovely. Okay. I have a u minus 6 and a 2u minus 1 in the numerator, and I have u plus 2 down here twice. This doesn't simplify. It's in two different fractions, but they are both in the denominator. So my final answer here is u minus 6 times 2u minus 1 all over u plus 2 times u plus 2. Now, you might see this denominator written as u plus 2 squared. I don't care. I like the other one just as well. So my labs will accept either answer. Either one is fine. Questions? That's probably the hardest problem we do because it's got all of that factoring in it. I would encourage you as you work these problems and you factor, before you go about simplifying things, double check your factors. In other words, take what you think are your factors, go to another piece of paper, multiply them back out, and make sure you get what you started with. Because otherwise it's too easy just to simplify things that you think are going to simplify. On the homework, it says you get to work a similar problem, but that's not very helpful if you don't know what the mistake is you've made. So on the quiz, you don't get that similar problem. So make sure that you're checking your factors before you try to simplify. All right. So next type of problems we're looking at are addition and subtraction problems. And when you add and subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So the least common denominator is the least common multiple. That's what the common denominator is. So the least common multiple of the two sets of denominators is your least common denominator. Okay. So what I like to tell students to do is, again, you've got to have a common denominator, and I'm going to give you what I think is the easiest way to do this. So we're going to come over here to the side, and we're going to find our least common denominator. We're going to start with the largest number. The largest number is 9. Will 6 divide into 9? And the answer is no, it will not. We did this when we had numbers before. So now I go to a multiple of 9. So the next number that I multiply by and get 9, or multiple of 9, is going to be 18. Will 6 divide into 18? Yes, it will. So 18 is the number part of my least common multiple. Then I look at my variables, and notice that even the directions up here say use the highest power of each letter. That means I need to use x to the third, and I need to use y to the first, okay? Because there's a y in both of them, but it's just a y to the first. But x to the third is the highest power. I can't just use 9, the largest number, because 6 doesn't divide into 9. I'm going to show you how to do this, and if you will follow along this, it's going to be the same process for every single one of these problems. So we're going to start by writing down this least common denominator of 18x cubed times y. And then we're going to write our second fraction with the denominator of 18x cubed times y. So my question to you is, what do I multiply by 9 to get 18? Somebody help me out. What do I multiply by 9 to get 18? 2. Yep. So I do 2 times the denominator. That means I have to do 2 times the numerator. Okay? So I didn't need to change the x cubed, and I didn't need to change the y. So if I multiply 2 times 9 to get 18, I have to multiply 2 times 2, and I get 4. Okay? What do I multiply by this denominator, 6x squared y, to get 18x cubed y? So I can start with, what do I need to multiply by 6 to get 18, but I got to do one more thing. Ooh, that's so close. Yes. Okay, so as I'm looking at this, I see I have an x squared y, and I need an x cubed y. So most of you figured out 3. I need 3 times 6 is 18. I have to have an x, so I turn this x squared times x into x cubed. But I already had a y, so I don't need to multiply by the y, okay? So in the denominator is a 3x, and in the numerator is a 3x. And so 3x times 1 is 3x. I have now a common denominator. Once I have a common denominator, I simply can write that down. And then I go about collecting my numerators. So for 4 minus 3x over x, 18x cubed y. And that's my answer. Questions? Okay. Number 8. Common denominator we need again. What is my least common denominator for 8x squared y and 2xy squared? I'm going to need a number, an x term, and a y term. Help me out. What's my least common denominator? Yes. That's the first part. So I look at my numbers. I have a 2 and an 8. So I need an 8. Got one response that's got everything. I got a couple other responses got part of it. What about my variables? I need an 8. I got that. What else do I need? Yep. Anybody else out there? Make sure it's the highest power of the variables. I do need an x and a y, but do I need just an x and a y? I need to make sure the highest power of the x is used and the highest power of the y. So I have an x squared y squared. So 8x squared y squared is going to be my least common denominator, okay? Which means that both of my denominators are going to change. So be thinking, what do I need to multiply the first fraction by so that I get this common denominator? What do I need to multiply the denominator of the first fraction by so that I change 8x squared y into 8x squared y squared? Numerator and denominator by the same thing. What if I multiply by z? Would z help? Sometimes I have to amuse myself. And IDK is okay. It lets me know you're alert and awake. Not off having a latte somewhere. Or breakfast. What do I need? Notice this one has, I believe you. It's okay. We're gonna get through this. So this one has an 8x squared y, right? This one has an 8x squared y squared. Tell me what's different. Somebody tell me what's different in this denominator and this denominator. That might be a better question to ask. They're very similar, but the second one is different. Which variable is different? Let's try that. I just want to know which variable is different. There you go. The y and the y squared. One of them has a y and one of them has a y squared. So what I need to change is the y. So that's the only thing I'm going to have to multiply both the top and the bottom by. So sometimes you're asking yourself the question, what's different? Okay. So if you can figure out what's different, then that's going to help you figure out what you need to multiply by. So if I multiply the denominator by y and the numerator by y, this is y times y, and that does indeed give me my y squared, okay? And so that's going to give me a 7y in my numerator here, all right? So let's try the second one and see if this one's a little bit better, okay? Numerator, let's just concentrate on the denominator, because whatever we put down here, we're going to put in the top. How do I turn 2 into 8? What do I multiply 2 by to get 8? 4. Okay, excellent. Okay, so that means I have to put a 4 in the top. Are my variables the same, or do I need to multiply by some variable to make my variables match up? If my variables are the same, tell me I don't need to multiply by anything. If my variables are not the same, what do I need to multiply by so that I get the same? Yep, I need an x. And whatever I do in the bottom, I do in the top. Because I already had a y squared. The y squareds were the same. Life is great. So if I multiply 2 times 4, I get 8. X times x gives me x squared. And then y squared is just hanging out. And so my numerator, I get 12x. So my denominator, ooh, that's a funky line. My denominator is 8x squared y squared. And my numerator is 7y plus 12x. And there is not anything else you can do to that problem. It is a beautiful answer. Question. I know adding and subtracting fractions are not your most favorite thing. I totally get that. But they're not going anywhere. You can do this. You just got to have a little confidence. It's okay. It's all going to be fun. I promise it's going to be okay. Somehow, some way, it's going to be fun. All right. Least common denominator. So for this least common denominator, here's what's different. And I think it's important that you see what's different. In this first one, everything was multiplied together on both pieces. In this one, it was the product in both denominators. Here, I have binomials. Two terms that are connected by addition and subtraction, and that's what makes them binomials. These are actually called monomials, even though they have lots of pieces to them, because they're only one term each, okay? So when I start adding and subtracting pieces, then they become polynomials, multiple pieces. So my least common denominator to me is a little bit easier with this kind of problem than with the monomials. So I have to have x plus 6 in my denominator, and I have to have x minus 5 in my denominator. So my least common denominator is x plus 6 times x minus 5. Okay, that's it. So think maybe we're going to get this. We're going to get this a little bit better. So each of my new fractions is going to have a denominator of x plus 6 times x minus 5. And then plus fraction number 2, x plus 6 times x minus 5. Okay, let's start with this first one. What do I need to multiply? So think about this x plus 6 in parentheses. What do I need to multiply by x plus 6 to get my new denominator? I am open to suggestions. And if I don't like your suggestion, I won't use it. So you're not hurting anybody by making suggestions. You can even tell me Z, and I'm not going to yell at you. I'm just going to say I'm not going to use it. So what do I need to multiply x plus 6 by to get x plus 6 times x minus 5? Thank you. X minus 5. Okay. So I need to multiply by x minus 5. Well, whatever I do in the bottom, I also have to do in the top. Okay. So x minus 5 times x plus 6 gives me x plus 6 times x minus 5. So in the numerator, I have 2x times x minus 5. And we can clean that up. You can go ahead and multiply it if you want to. Okay. In fact, I may go ahead and multiply it out. That might make life a little bit nicer because I did here. So that's going to be 2x squared minus 10x. So multiplied numerator by x minus 5, denominator by x minus 5. Okay, well, as long as you can hear me, that's a good thing. The frozen screen is probably not good, but as long as you can hear me. Yeah, email me afterwards and we'll talk, okay? So, okay. All right, so let's look at the second part of this. So the second part of this, what do I need to multiply x minus 5 by to get x plus 6 times x minus 5? Yep, I need an x plus 6. And what I do in the bottom, I have to do in the top. And that's going to give me 7x squared plus 42x, right? You know, guys, I have two fractions with the same denominator. And so I can just add their numerators, all right? As long as my two fractions have the same denominator, I can add together the numerators. And so now I'm going to come together with this. I have my denominator of x plus 6 times x minus 5. My first numerator is 2x squared minus 10x plus, because that's my operation in there, 7x squared plus 42. If this had been a minus, I would probably put a parentheses back there just to make sure I didn't lose anything. So now I have 2x squared plus 7x squared is going to be 9x squared. I have, yep, nope, I lost something. You guys let me lose my x here. 7x times 6 is 42x. Okay, negative 10x plus 42x is plus 32x. And all of this is over x plus 6 times x minus 5. And we are done with that one. Ooh, yay! I've totally checked out on the time. Okay. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces that we want to add together. Okay. Before I do anything, I want to factor my denominators. If you don't factor your denominators, it makes it really a whole lot harder to figure out what your least common denominator is. So for this first one, I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do to factor w plus 3. So I'm just going to write 5 over w plus 3. And I can't even factor the second one. I just get 2 over 3w. However, I can factor w squared plus 3w. I can factor a w out of this, okay? So to find my least common denominator, it's a little bit more challenging this time. I need to look for my numbers that are in front. So I need a 3. I need a W. And I need this W plus 3. Okay. Questions about why this is my least common denominator? Okay, so I'm going to write each of these over my least common denominator. So I'm going to write 3 new fractions, 3 completely new fractions. Each one of them is going to need something new in it, okay? In this first fraction, I need to multiply by 3 times W. Once again, whatever is in the bottom goes in the top. So 3 times W plus 3 gives me my new denominator. And so when I multiply this, I get 15W in the numerator. In the second fraction, I need to multiply the denominator by W plus 3. Because what I multiply times this is going to have to give me this new denominator. So in the top, I multiply by W plus 3. And that gives me 2W plus 6, making sure I'm distributing that, okay? And then finally, for this last one, I need to multiply the denominator by 3, because I already have a W and a W plus 3, but I need a 3W. And so numerator and denominator by 3, and that's going to give me plus 45. So my common denominator now, I have fractions now with common denominators. My common denominator is 3W, W plus 3. Don't multiply that together. That's our greatest thing we want to do is multiply things together. Don't do that. I'm going to write all the pieces. So I have 15W plus, then I have my numerator for my second fraction, 2W plus 6 plus, and then my numerator for my last fraction is 45. And I can collect together some things, my like terms I can collect together. And so my fraction answer still has a 3W, W plus 3 in the denominator. 15 plus 2 gives me 17W. And 6 plus 45 gives me 51. And that is my final answer. Ooh, maybe not. Anybody know anything I could do to this one? I can actually simplify this one further. This is kind of exciting. We don't see this very often. How many times does 51 divide by 17? What's 51 divided by 17? It is. 17 will actually factor out of this. And it factors with the W plus 3. Sometimes I amaze myself in the things we do. And so my W plus 3 actually divides out. And my final answer, this doesn't happen very often, is 17 over 3W. That was like, yes, yes, yes. That is amazing. I love it when strange things happen. Makes me so happy. Maybe I have any question. All right. More factoring that we must do. This will be nice. I promise it won't be that bad. Guaranteed. Love this. It'll be fun. Okay, so we are going to factor. So this denominator, oh, that looked terrible. Sorry about that. Okay. Why can I not draw a line? This denominator factors into x minus 1 and x minus 4. That gives me positive 4 and negative 5. Okay. Minus, I'm going to suggest to you something. I'm going to suggest that you change this to plus a negative 2. When you see minus in one of these problems, change this to plus and make your numerator negative. It's going to make a world of difference in how you work this problem, guaranteed. Okay? So if you see a minus fractions, change it to plus and change your sign. Okay, so let's continue to factor this denominator. It's going to be x minus 1 and x minus 1. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so this least common denominator is just a tiny bit tricky. I need an x minus 1. I need an x minus 4. And now I move to this denominator. And that does not look like a 1. Okay. I need another x minus 1. I need 2 x minus 1s because I have one of my denominators has 2 factors of x minus 1. And so I have to have the most that either one of them has. Okay. So my denominator for each of my new fractions is going to be x minus 1 times x minus 4 times x minus 1. And you can write that in whatever order you want to. Right? So in my first fraction, I have an x minus 1 and an x minus 4. Well, my denominator has 2 of these x minus 1s. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by x minus 1. And that's going to give me 3x minus 3. Okay? This is where you're going to appreciate making that plus a negative. In this second one, I have an x minus 1 and an x minus 1. I need an x minus 4 to complete this. And so x minus 4 is what I'm going to have. And this is going to give me negative 2x plus 8. And now my common denominator, I have a common denominator, x minus 1, x minus 4, x, like I said, it really doesn't matter what order you put these in. My first fraction is 3x minus 3. My second numerator is negative 2x plus 8. And now I collect together my two terms. And so I have an x plus 5 over x minus 1, x minus 4, and x minus 1. And that is my final answer. We're done adding and subtracting. We're going to do one more fabulously fun thing. Questions, questions, questions. This is where we start putting all of these things we've been talking about together, okay? All right. So these next problems are actually called complex rational equations, and we're going to make them nice. We're going to actually do the same thing we did in the previous problems. We're going to find the least common denominator, and we're going to multiply everything up here by that least common denominator. So if I look at number 12, I see a fraction within a fraction. That's what makes it complex. The only denominator I have is x. And so I need to figure out what my least common denominator is, and the only denominator is x. And so that is my least common denominator. I'm going to multiply x times everything. Now I'm literally going to multiply this through here. So I have x over x plus 9 times x. And the denominator, I have x over x minus 6 times x. Multiplying the x through each piece. This one's actually pretty nice. X over x is 1 plus 9x. In the denominator, I have 1 minus 6x. That's my answer. That was not so bad. Let me see if I can get anybody who's awake to help me out and figure out what the least common denominator for number 13 is. I've got an 8, a 16, and a 2y. What is my least common denominator for 8, 16, and 2y? That's actually my least common factor, or greatest common factor. Let's look at the 8, the 16, and the 2y. What's the largest number of 8, 16, and 2? Which of those three numbers is the largest? Yeah, the 16, okay? My least common denominator has to have the largest number. I know, it's kind of weird. Least common denominator is the biggest number. Think of it as largest number, okay? So my least common denominator is my largest number, okay? It also has to have a y. And the reason I have to have a y is because I have a y in one of my denominators. So my least common denominator has to have the number that all of the denominators will divide into, right? So it has to be the biggest number. And then it has to have the variable that's anywhere down there, okay? So I'm going to multiply again everything in this top part by 16y, okay? I know these are very messy, and I do apologize for this. And part of it is it's just there's so much factoring. So bear with us. I know I'm getting several folks who are like, okay, I really am here. And I know it's kind of crazy stuff. So this may be something that you need to go back and absorb and then come prepared to ask questions about tomorrow, because we should have a little bit of extra time tomorrow so that when you go back and look at this and you start this homework, you can come back and ask some really good questions tomorrow. So let's try to get through it in terms of that. Okay. So in this one, I'm going to have 16y times y is going to give me 16y squared minus, and I'm going to multiply 16y times this 3y minus 8 over 8. We're going to simplify that in a second. Okay. Here I have 16y times 35 over 16. I like to do this where I'm not actually multiplying this out because I think it helps you to simplify it. It helps me to simplify it, okay? So for this first part, I can't do anything with 16y squared. I'm just kind of hanging out with that. The second part, 8 divides into 16 and leaves me with 2. So I have now 2y times this, and so that's going to give me a 6y squared minus 16y, because I'm multiplying the 2y times the 3y and the 2y times the 8, except that's going to be plus. I'm going to have this minus, makes that a negative. In the denominator, my 16 divides, and I have 35y. And 2y divides into 16y and leaves me with 8. And so that's going to be a 56. Right? Not quite done. I still got some other simplifying I can do. This is going to give me 10y squared minus 16y and 35y plus 56. And I can actually factor a 2y out of both terms in the numerator. And it gives me a 5y minus 8. Sorry, I can't divide. And I can factor 7 out of both terms in the denominator. And that does not help me at all. Plus 8. Yeah, that didn't help me any. Oh, that's because that's a plus 16, sorry. And that makes it a plus 8. Yep, now they'll simplify. 5y, 5y, and it leaves me with 2y over 7. I know, this is probably one of the hardest sections we've done. I know, right on the heels of a test. All right. Last problem. Absolutely last problem. Okay. So same thing. I'm going to do exactly the same thing here. My least common denominator is x times y. Okay. And so I'm going to multiply everything up here by xy. And I'm going to do it so that you see everything I'm going to do. So this is going to be xy times 9x squared minus y squared over xy. That's just my numerator. Over 3xy over y minus xy over x. And now stuff is going to cancel out. In the numerator, I have 9x squared minus y squared. In the denominator, I'm left with a 3x minus a y. And the final thing we have to factor is this is the difference of two squares, 3x minus y, 3x plus y, over 3x minus y. Those 3x minus y's cancel out. And my final answer is 3x plus y. I know, it's a long set of stuff and involves lots and lots of factoring. Practice. Practice. That's all I can tell you. Practice. Do your homework. Do your homework. Do your homework. Bring me questions tomorrow. I think I've kind of overwhelmed some folks. I apologize. If I could see your faces, I would know that you have this glazed over look on them. All right? Unglaze. Okay? Take these problems, see what you can do with the homework. Okay? I know one person was having trouble with the feed and it kept jumping around and locking up and stuff. So if you were still having trouble with that, let me know. I will post the recording of this. Some reason, for whatever reason, and